Hello and welcome to this edition of NASCAR's Lost Teams, Junior Johnson and Associates. In 1953, a moonshine runner by the name of Junior Johnson took a number 75 Oldsmobile to the Darlington Raceway, to the Southern 500. After that race, the team was dormant, or inactive if you will, for a little more than a decade. When, in 1965, Junior Johnson was able to score 13 wins in his number 26 Holly Farms Ford Galaxy. In 1966, though, the team was not able to find their way to victory lane, even though with a rotation of very capable drivers such as A.J. Foyt, Curtis Turner, Bobby Isaac, and Gordon Johncock. Now, in 1967, Darrell Waltrip drove that number 26 to 6 poles and 1 victory at North Wilkesboro Speedway. The following season, Cale Yarborough joined Johnson's team in 1968, driving the number 26 and the number 98. He would end up winning twice at Trenton and Atlanta, after kind of starting off the season kind of slow. Now, in 1969, things got much better for the team. Leroy not only started the season winning the Daytona 500, but then proceeded to win the World 600 and the Rebel 400, making him the first ever driver to win the, quote, Triple Crown of Crown Jewel races. Now, not only did Yarborough win those 3 races, but he also won 4 other races for a season total of 7. Now, the Mercury that he was driving, Mercury pulled its factory support from the sport. Therefore, Johnson scaled back to only running a couple races in 1970. The same season same year that Mercury pulled their factory support. Only fielding the number 98 for Donnie Allison once, Fred Lorenzen once, and David Pearson once. Yarborough did return late in the season, and he did win at Charlotte. In 1971, Johnson and Leroy only made 4 starts. Now, Johnson would not field the team at all until the middle of 1974. In the meantime, he would serve as the head mechanic for Bobby Allison's number 12 Coca-Cola team, owned by Richard Howard. So, in 1974, the whole reason Junior Johnson and Associates revived their operation after 2 completely dormant seasons. A Canadian rookie racer by the name of Earl Ross was leaving Alan Brooks' operation. Later in the season, he would be joined by Cale Yarborough, no relation at all to Leroy. Ross, in a number 52 Carling Chevrolet, was able to win in the fall race at Martinsville. Overall, he was strong, with 1 win, 4 top 5s, and 9 top 10s, and 15 starts. He won Rookie of the Year honors for 1974. Then, Cale Yarborough, in his number 11 Carling Car Care Chevrolet, had an awesome season. His best start was first 3 times at Rockingham, Martinsville, and in the spring, and then in the summer at Atlanta. His best finish, was first a surprising, incredible 10 times. Both races at Riverside and Bristol, then in the spring in Atlanta, Martinsville, Dover, then in the summer at Nashville Fairgrounds, and in the fall at Darlington and North Wilkesboro. And he led the most laps for 8 out of 10 of those victories. Incredible. Overall, an awesome 3 poles, 10 wins, 20 top 5s, and 22 top 10s, ending the 1974 Cup Series season second in final points. At season's end, Earl Ross left the team. Yarborough stayed. Also, Carling was replaced by Tyson Foods, his primary sponsor. In 1975, Johnson scaled back to just 1 car, the number 11 Tyson Holly Farms Chevrolet, with Cale Yarborough behind the wheel. The team did not run either races at Riverside, nor the spring race at Richmond, but had a very solid season otherwise. His best start was first 3 times, in the summer at Michigan and in the fall at Martinsville and Bristol. His best finish was first also 3 times, in both races at Rockingham and in the summer at Nashville Fairgrounds, leading the most laps each time. Overall, they scored 3 poles, 3 wins, 13 top 5s, and 13 top 10s, finishing the 1975 Cup Series season 9th in final Cup Series points. Now, in 1976, the team was all back. Johnson, Yarborough, number 11 Tyson Chevrolet, except this season ended differently. His best start was first twice, in the fall at Pocono and Dover, and his best finish was first an awesome 9 times, including 4 in a row late in the season, and 5 out of 6 from races 21 to 26. Incredible. Overall, 2 poles, 9 wins, 22 top 5s, and 23 top 10s on their way to the 1976 Cup Series championship. And it didn't end there. In 1977, Cale undoubtedly returned to drive the number 11 Holly Farms Chevrolet to defend his championship, and defend he did. His best start was first 3 times, both races at Bristol and the spring race at Riverside. They won 9 times, the Daytona 500, both races at Bristol and Martinsville, then in the spring at North Wilkesboro, Richmond, and Dover, and then in the summer at Michigan. Overall, they scored 3 poles, 9 wins, 25 top 5s, and 26 top 10s on their way to their second Cup Series championship in a row. Now, since the team was experiencing so much success, they were able to pick up a couple new primary sponsors for the 1978 season. First, National City Travelers checks and Busch Beer adorned the number 11 Oldsmobile in 1978. Yes, they did change makes. His best start was first 8 times, both races at Daytona, Talladega, and Atlanta, then in the fall at Rockingham and Ontario. His best finish was first another impressive 10 times, both races at Nashville Fairgrounds, then in the spring at Riverside and Talladega, then in the summer at Michigan, and in the fall at Bristol, Darlington, North Wilkesboro, Martinsville, and Rockingham. Overall, again, they scored an incredible 8 poles, 10 wins, 23 top 5s, and 24 top 10s, en route to his 3rd consecutive Cup Series championship, a record held until Jimmy Johnson broke it at the conclusion of the 2008 Cup Series season. An incredible, unheard of at the time, 3-year run. 1979 was not quite as great of a season for Cale. He was one of the drivers battling for the win in the 1979 Daytona 500 win. He and Donnie Allison took each other out and ended up getting into a fight after they got out of each other's wrecked race cars. Cale, Donnie, and Bobby Allison. A race saw by millions due to the fact that most of the east coast of the U.S. was buried in snow and stuck in their homes with nothing to do but watch the race. His best start in that number 11 Busch Oldsmobile was first in the fall at Ontario. His best finish was first 4 times, in the spring at Richmond, Nashville Fairgrounds, then in the summer at Pocono, and in the fall at Charlotte. Overall, they scored 1 pole, 4 wins, 19 top 5s, and 22 top 10s, finishing the 79 season a solid 4th in points. That following season, a new decade, and Yarborough felt like he needed a change. He decided at the end of 1980 he was going to start the race part-time, and even told Johnson that his replacement should be Darrell Waltrip. In 1980, in that number 11 Busch Chevrolet, Cale's best start was first 14 times. Both races, 14 times. Both races at Nashville Fairgrounds, Bristol, and Dover, then in the spring at Charlotte, Texas World Speedway, and Riverside, then in the summer at Daytona and Pocono, then in the fall at Richmond and North Wilkesboro. His best finish was first 6 times, both races at Rockingham, then in the spring at Texas World Speedway, then in the fall at Michigan and Bristol. Overall, they scored 14 poles, 6 wins, 19 top 5s, and 22 top 10s, finishing the 1980 season and his run with Junior Johnson and Associates' second and final Cup Series points. So, that's just what Johnson did. He got Darrell Waltrip to come over from Dyegard Racing, and he brought the Mountain Dew sponsorship with him. So, in that number 11 Mountain Dew Buick, Darrell Waltrip had an amazing season. 11 poles, all 3 races at Riverside, both at Bristol, then Michigan and Pocono in the summer, and in the fall at Martinsville, Charlotte, and North Wilkesboro, and Rockingham. 12 wins. Both races at Bristol, Rockingham, and in the spring at Richmond, Darlington, Riverside, then in the summer at Nashville Fairgrounds, Pocono. Then 4 in a row in the fall at Martinsville, North Wilkesboro, Charlotte, and the aforementioned Rockingham. Overall, they scored 11 poles, 12 wins, 21 top 5s, and 25 top 10s, en route to another Cup Series championship, this time with Darrell Waltrip behind the wheel. At the end of the 1981 season, crew chief Tim Brewer left, and the team's jackman at the time, Jeff Hammond, became the crew chief for 1982. So, for 1982, Waltrip in that number 811 Buick was excellent again this season. His best start was first 7 times, both races at North Wilkesboro, then in the spring at Richmond, Bristol, National Fairgrounds, Dover, then in the fall at Riverside. His best finish was first 12 times, both races at Bristol, North Wilkesboro, Talladega, National Fairgrounds, then in the spring in Atlanta, in the fall at Dover, in Martinsville, and Rockingham. Overall, they scored 7 poles, 12 wins, 17 top 5s, and 20 top 10s, on their way to back-to-back Cup Series championships. Also, Johnson sold 50% of the team to California investor Warner Hogden. That following season in 1983, Waltrip was back, obviously, to defend his championship in the number 11 Pepsi Challenger Chevrolet. His best start was first 7 times, both Riverside races in the spring at National Fairgrounds and in the summer at Pocono, then in the fall at Richmond, Martinsville, North Wilkesboro. His best finish was first 6 times, both races at Bristol and North Wilkesboro, and in the summer, at the spring rather, at Martinsville and National Fairgrounds. Overall, they scored 7 poles, 6 wins, 22 top 5s, and 25 top 10s, finishing the 1983 season second in final Cup Series points. In 1984, the number 11 got a new primary sponsor in Budweiser, and Johnson started up his second team with the number 12 Budweiser Chevrolet, driven by none other than Neil Bonnet. Waltrip in the number 11 had a best start of first 4 times, both races at Richmond in the spring, at National Fairgrounds, and then in the fall at North Wilkesboro. His best finish was first 7 times, in the spring at Bristol, Darlington, National Fairgrounds, then in the fall at Michigan, Richmond, Martinsville, and North Wilkesboro. Overall, he scored 4 poles, 7 wins, 13 top 5s, and 20 top 10s, finishing 5th in final Cup Series points. As for the number 12 of Neil Bonnet, his best finish was second at National Fairgrounds in Riverside in the spring, So overall, yeah, he didn't get any poles or any wins, but he did get 7 top 5s and 14 top 10s, and he finished his first season with the team 8th in final Cup Series points. Next up, in 1985, both Waltrip and Bonnet returned to the number 11 and the number 12 respectively. Waltrip's best start was first 5 times, in the spring at Richmond, North Wilkesboro, Martinsville, Riverside, then in the summer at Pocono. His best finish was first 3 times, in the spring at Charlotte and in the fall at Richmond and Rockingham. Overall, they scored 5 poles, 3 wins, 18 top 5s, and 21 top 10s, on his way to his 3rd and final career Cup Series championship. Bonnet had a solid season as well. His best start was first in the spring in Atlanta, and his best finish was first twice, in the spring at Rockingham and North Wilkesboro. Overall, he scored 1 pole, 2 wins, 11 top 5s, and 18 top 10s, en route to a very solid 4th in final Cup Series points. Things started to get tense between Waltrip and Johnson in 1986. In fact, at the conclusion of the season, Waltrip would leave the team. His best start was first in the spring at Riverside. His best finish was first 3 times, in the spring at Riverside and in the fall at Bristol and North Wilkesboro. Overall, they scored 1 pole, 3 wins, 21 top 5s, and 22 top 10s, finishing the 86 Cup Series season, as well as his time with Junior Johnson and Associates, 2nd in final Cup Series points. Neil Bonnet returned for his 3rd and also his final Cup Series season for Johnson. His best finish was first in the fall at Rockingham. Due to an injury, Davey Allison filled in for Bonnet for the summer race at Talladega, both starting and finishing 7th. Overall, they scored 0 poles, 1 win, 6 top 5s, and 13 top 10s, ending the 1986 season and his time with Junior Johnson and Associates, 13th in final Cup Series points. In the 1984 Cup Series champion, Terrylabonte took over the number 11 Budweiser Chevrolet in 1987. Johnson went back to just 1 car operation for that season. Labonte's best start was first 4 times, in the spring at Pocono and Riverside, then in the summer at Watkins Glen and Bristol. His best finish was first in the fall at North Wilkesboro. Overall, they scored 4 poles, 1 win, 13 top 5s, and 22 top 10s, ending his inaugural season with the team third in final points. Labonte was back behind the wheel in the number 11 Budweiser Chevrolet in 1988. His best start was first in the spring at North Wilkesboro, and his best finish was first also in the spring at North Wilkesboro. Overall, they scored 1 pole, 1 win, 11 top 5s, and 18 top 10s, finishing the 88 season fourth in final points. The following season, in 1989, Labonte did return for one final season. In that number 11 Budweiser Ford, his best finish was first twice, in the summer at Pocono and Talladega. Overall, they scored 0 poles, 2 wins, 9 top 5s, and 11 top 10s, ending the 1989 season as well as his time driving for Junior Johnson, 10th in final Cup Series points. A new decade and a new driver, with Jeff Bodine becoming the driver of the number 11 Budweiser Ford. His best start was first twice, in the spring at Darlington and Martinsville. His best finish was first 3 times, both races in Martinsville and in the summer at Pocono. Overall, they scored 2 poles, 3 wins, 11 top 5s, and 19 top 10s, finishing his first season with his team third in final points. Bodine did return for 91 to drive the number 11. Johnson also revived his second team again. His goal was to land Alan Kulwicki to drive, but he couldn't. So, out of spite, he signed Maxwell House Coffee, the sponsor Kulwicki had been negotiating with to sponsor his car. Johnson also would hire Sterling Marlin to drive the number 22 Maxwell House Ford. And he scored 1 pole at Talladega, and his best finish was second in the Daytona 500, and also at Bristol in the fall. Now, Bodine, he wrecked in the Winston and was forced to miss 2 races. Tommy Ellis would fill in. In 1991, in the All-Star race, Junior Johnson, Tommy Ellis, and Tim Brewer were all handed down a penalty for an oversized engine. The original penalty was Tommy Ellis was fined $18,000, just exactly what he earned for his 14th place finish in the All-Star race. Johnson was fined $7,000, and they all 3 were suspended for 12 weeks. Johnson discussed things over with NASCAR Commissioner Bunky Nextgen, and he agreed to reduce the penalty to just a 4-week suspension for both the owner and crew chief, due to the fact that it was just an exhibition race. Therefore, they put a number 97 car in Johnson's wife's name, the wife's Flossie's name, for 4 races. Now, Bodine's best start was first twice, in the spring at Darlington and in the fall at Phoenix. His best finish was first in the fall at Charlotte. Overall, they scored 2 poles, 1 win, 6 top 5s, and 12 top 10s, ending the 91 season and again his time driving for Johnson, 14th in final Cup Series points. Bill Elliott replaced Bodine in the number 11 Budweiser Ford. His best start was first twice, in the spring at Richmond and Charlotte. His best finish was first 5 times, including 4 of the first 5 races: Rockingham, Richmond, Atlanta, and Darlington, then in the fall in Atlanta. Overall, they scored 2 poles, 5 wins, 14 top 5s, and 17 top 10s, finishing second by only 1 point to Alan Kulwicki in the final race, in the standings. Whew. Boy, the 1992 season was tense. Last race. Sterling Marlin, now, in the number 22 Maxwell House Ford. His best start was first 4 times, both races at Darlington, the Daytona 500, in the summer at Talladega also. His best finish was second 3 times, in the spring at Martinsville, then in the summer at Daytona and Talladega. Overall, they scored 4 poles, 0 wins, 6 top 5s, and 13 top 10s, finishing the 1992 season, along with his time driving for Junior Johnson, 10th in final points. After a very solid season in 92, Johnson and Elliott were looking for a season with similar success, but it just wasn't meant to be. His best start was first in the fall at Phoenix. His best finish was second in the fall at Richmond. Overall, they scored 1 pole, 0 wins, 6 top 5s, and 15 top 10s, finishing 8th in final point standings. Hut Strickland took over for Sterling Marlin. They changed the number to 27 and the sponsor to McDonald's. Expectations were high, but everyone was very disappointed, including Hut Strickland. Actually, I talked to him myself in an interview earlier this year. and we discussed this. If you guys want to go back in the archives and check out his comments on this, it would be worth your time. Now, owner, driver, sponsor, Hut himself, everybody was disappointed. Hut's lone top 5 was a 4th in the Daytona 500, and he finished 10th at Sonoma also, finishing 24th in points. Strickland and Johnson parted ways at the end of the season. And, I mean, you know, what else were you going to do? That next season, Elliott returned for one last season behind the wheel of the number 11 Budweiser Ford. His best start was first in the spring at Darlington, and his best finish was first in the fall at Darlington. Overall, they scored 1 pole, 1 win, 6 top 5s, and 12 top 10s, ending the 1994 season and his time with Junior Johnson 10th in final Cup Series points. This was the final Junior Johnson and Associates time that they would finish inside the top 10 in Cup Series points ever. In the number 27, McDonald's, they returned as primary sponsor, and the team signed Jimmy Spencer to drive full-time for 1994. The season was difficult. They DNQ'd for the Bristol night race in the fall. They did score 2 victories at Daytona and Talladega in the summer, and some people say that there's some possibly illegal with a carburetor, but I mean, their victories, they were counted, and congratulations to Jimmy Spencer for winning them, you know, and the whole team. But, you know, they also did score a pole for the fall race in North Wilkesboro. So overall, they scored 1 pole, 2 wins, 3 top 5s, and 4 top 10s, finishing the 1994 season and his time with Junior Johnson 27th in final points. Tommy Kendall did drive the number 27 at Watkins Glen to a 22nd place finish. Then that following season in 1995, Johnson signed Brett Bodine to drive the newly sponsored number 11 Lowe's Ford full-time. They had a difficult season, though. His best finish was 9th at North Wilkesboro in the spring. Overall, they scored just 2 top 10s. They finished the season 20th in final Cup Series points. The second car the team ran, the number 27 Hooters Ford, had Lloyd Allen Jr. attempt the first 6 races of the season, DNQing at Bristol and Atlanta. His best finish was 17th in the Daytona 500. So they let him go. Jeff Purvis attempted North Wilkesboro, but he DNQ'd. And then they picked up Elton Sawyer. He was the next driver of the 5 drivers that would end up getting an opportunity to drive this car. The number 27 Hooters Ford. He would end up running the majority of the remainder of the season, with the exception of Pocono and Daytona in the summer. Jimmy Horton finished 34th at Daytona, and Greg Sachs finished 17th at Daytona. Sawyer's best finish was 14th at Talladega in the summer. That would end up being the team's best finish of the year. Elton did DNQ at Sonoma and Bristol in the summer. Overall, the team finished 37th in owner points. Now, in the beginning of 1995 season, Johnson had completely pretty much pulled out of the day-to-day duties of running a competitive race team. You know, I mean, look at the results. He instead began leasing the number 11 to Brett Bodine. Well, at the conclusion of the 95 season, Bodine opted to purchase the number 11 and changed the name to Brett Bodine Racing, beginning in 1996. As for the number 27 team, it was sold to David Blair. They kept Elton Sawyer on as their driver for 1996. They could never really find sponsorship, though. Their last hurrah, per se, was when Ken Irwin Jr. made his Cup Series debut at Richmond, and Tonka Trucks was the sponsor. And they ran in the top 10 all night there. But at the end of 1998, they shut down. And in fact, the remains of their team went to Travis Carter, and he renumbered the number 27 to number 66 for Darrell Waltrip to drive with Kmart as sponsorship for his final 2 seasons, with Travis Carter and Brett Bodine Racing both shutting down in 2003, ironically. And ironically, Darrell Waltrip, who won 3 championships with Junior Johnson, ended up finishing his career in one of Junior Johnson's old cars. It's kind of ironic if you think about it. Now, some people at times felt that Johnson did not do them right. But overall, he had a very successful Cup Series team, with drivers such as Cale Yarborough and Darrell Waltrip that won 3 Cup Series championships apiece for the team, 6 in total. Terrylabonte, Neil Bonnet, Jeff Bodine, Bill Elliott, Jimmy Spencer, Hut Strickland, Sterling Marlin, Brett Bodine, Elton Sawyer, Lloyd Allen Jr., Earl Ross, Bobby Isaac, A.J. Foyt, Darrell Derringer, Fred Lorenzen, Leroy Yarborough, and Bobby Allison. That's an incredible list of drivers for a team to have had. So, 6 Cup Series championships, 132 wins, 113 poles. Yes, a lot of success. But in my opinion, he sold Brett Bodine a crap team. And he knew it. And that's why he wanted out. I wish that Bodine would have realized this and not have bought the number 11. But that's what worked out. And Junior Johnson also was a driver before he became an owner of this team. And, I mean, he won like 50 races. So, I mean, good for Junior Johnson. He's an incredible owner, controversial owner, and I hope everybody enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.